Next, the House Science and Technology Committee examines the use of domestic drones and safety issues. This is an hour and 50 minutes.
Welcome to today's hearing titled Unmanned Aircraft Systems Research and Development. In front of you are packets containing the written testimony, biography, and truth and testimony disclosure for today's witnesses. I'll recognize myself for an opening statement and then recognize the ranking member as well. Today's hearing will examine research and development of unmanned aircraft systems, also known as UAS. The hearing will also provide an overview of how UAS research, development, and flight test enable the integration of UAS into the National Airspace System. I'm going to use the term drone since that is how most people refer to them. However, the term unmanned aircraft systems is a more complete and accurate term. As the name suggests, UAS are complex systems made up not only of the aircraft, but also the supporting ground, air, and communications infrastructure. Drones come in a variety of shapes and sizes and can carry out a wide range of missions. In the past 10 years, the public has become familiar with military drones. Less discussed are civilian and non-military drones that have the ability to transform our everyday lives. Commercial drones have the potential to carry out a wide range of tasks across a broad range of sectors, including agriculture, weather, energy, and disaster relief. The Teal Group, an aerospace and defense industry market intelligence firm, predicts America will spend over $11 billion on UAS research, development, testing, evaluation, and procurement over the next decade. Total worldwide spending for the same period is projected to be $91 billion. In 2013, the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International estimated that in the next 10 years, over 100,000 U.S. jobs could be created as a result of UAS integration into the National Airspace System. The report also notes that continued delays in integrating drones in the National Airspace System could cost the U.S. more than $10 billion per year, or $27 million per day in potential earnings from investment in drones research and development. In June 2014, the Department of Transportation Office of Inspector General released an audit report that criticized the FAA for being slow to integrate drones into the National Airspace System. The audit concluded it's unlikely that integration would be completed by the September 2015 deadline. The FAA and NASA are working together to ensure safe and successful integration of drones in the National Airspace System. Some of the research being done seeks to ensure that drones have the technologies necessary to avoid mid-air collisions and the ability to be controlled from a central location. Drones can greatly benefit our society. Farmers can use small drones to monitor their crops. Emergency responders could move quickly to access disaster areas to search for survivors. Energy companies could examine power lines and pipelines to assess damage or prevent leaks. UAS experimentation and testing at high schools and universities might lead to technology breakthroughs as well as inspire students to enter STEM fields. However, due to the delays in integrating UAS into the National Airspace System, the public is not yet allowed to use drones to do many of these things. Many other countries have developed a regulatory framework supportive of drone use for such activities. Consequently, some U.S.-based companies have moved research, development, testing, and high-paying jobs offshore. Our goal today is to better understand the research underway to overcome these barriers. We are particularly interested in hearing how government-funded and private sector UAS research and development informs or should inform the integration of UAS into the National Airspace System. UAS experimentation integration of UAS into the National Airspace System. That concludes my opening statement, but I want to mention before recognizing the ranking member that we're going to have a demonstration in a minute that, to my knowledge, will be the first such demonstration in this committee room. And by the way, we had to get permission to fly a drone in the committee room as well, so the rules are still pretty strict, but I appreciate the widespread interest in the particular subject. By the way, hardly a week goes by where the subject of drones is not covered in some national publication or on the front of the local newspaper or leads the news. So this is a timely subject for lots and lots of reasons. Also, without objection, I have a letter I'd like to put into the record. from the National Association of Realtors, supporting what we're doing here today and supporting the integration as well. With that, I'll recognize the ranking member, Ms. Bonamici, the gentlewoman from Washington, for her comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I join you in welcoming our distinguished panel of witnesses, and I look forward to your testimony. I want to state that Ranking Member Johnson is currently detained at another committee and will join us shortly, as well as some of our other members are currently in other committees. The lack of other members other than Representative Lofgren on this side does not indicate a lack of interest in the issue, certainly. And in the meantime, I want to start by thanking Chairman Smith for calling this hearing on unmanned aircraft systems research and development. Because of the work in my home state of Oregon, it's close to Washington, Mr. Chairman, but it's I do want to make that clear, because my home state of Oregon, I'm particularly interested in hearing how we can provide universities with the flexibility they need for performing UAS testing in a safe and cost-effective manner, and private sector developers with the regulatory certainty necessary to support this growing industry. So we, Oregon, that's why I needed to make this clear, because we are a participant in the Pan-Pacific UAS Test Range Complex, led by the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and we have 3 test sites in Oregon. The potential benefits of UAS technology to agriculture, environmental research, natural resource management, and I want to add that the chairman acknowledged some of those emergency disaster relief efforts, is really multiplied by expanding the workforce focused on the development of new products, which is creating, of course, new job opportunities throughout not only Oregon, but in other test areas as well. So I do look forward to hearing how we in Congress and across the federal government can help safely and responsibly support the development of this exciting industry with so much potential. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Bonamici. And I'll now introduce our witnesses today. And our first witness is Dr. Ed Wagner. Dr. Wagner is the Research Director of NASA's Integrated Systems Research Programs Office, which seeks to integrate next-gen technologies into vehicle and operational systems. In this capacity, Dr. Wagner also oversees UAS integration into the National Airspace System. Dr. Wagner has worked for NASA since 1982, where he began as a researcher in theoretical aerodynamics. We welcome you. Our second witness today is Mr. Jim Williams. Mr. Williams is manager of FAA's UAS Integration Office. As such, he is responsible for coordinating FAA's efforts to integrate UAS into the National Airspace System through rulemaking, standardization, and research and development. Before working on UAS, Mr. Williams served as the director of FAA's Engineering Services and as the director of the Air Traffic Control Communications Services Directorate. Mr. Williams received his bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering. Our third witness today is Dr. John Lauber. Dr. Lauber was a co-chair on the National Research Council's Committee on Autonomy Research for Civil Aviation. Dr. Lauber is now a private consultant, and he has previously served as Airbus's Senior Vice President of Product Safety. He has also served as a member of the National Transportation Safety Board. Dr. Lauber received his PhD in neuropsychology from The Ohio State University. Today's fourth witness is Mr. Brian Wynn, CEO and President of the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International. Mr. Wynn formerly served as the President of the Electric Drive Transportation Association, CEO of the Association for Automatic Identification and Mobility, and held a leadership role at the Intelligent Transportation Society of America. Mr. Wynn received a bachelor's degree from the University of Scranton, a master's degree from the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University, and was a Fulbright Scholar at the University of Cologne in Germany. Testifying fifth today will be Mr. Colin Gwynn, Chief Revenue Officer of 3D Robotics, North America's largest personal drone company. Mr. Gwynn is the co-founder and former CEO of DJI North America and has been featured on 60 Minutes, Fox, and in TechCrunch. Before working at 3D Robotics and DJI, Mr. Gwynn founded a company that specialized in producing aerial photography marketing materials for luxury home builders. Mr. Gwynn received his bachelor's degree from the University of Texas in Austin and attended the University of Miami School of Business. Our final witness is Dr. John Hansman, the T. Wilson Professor of Aeronautics and Astronautics at MIT, where he leads the Humans and Automation Division and serves as Director of the MIT International Center for Air Transportation. Dr. Hansman is a Fellow of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics and has received several awards, including the 1997 FAA Excellence in Aviation Award, the 1994 LOSI Atmospheric Award, the 1990 STIF, which is International Scientific and Technical Soaring Organization Diploma for Technical Contributions, and the 1986 AIAA Award for Best Paper in Thermophysics. Dr. Hansman received his PhD from MIT. We thank the witnesses again for being here today, and Dr. Wagner, will begin with you.
So Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Bonamici, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on NASA's Aeronautics Research Program and the R&D challenges associated with unmanned aircraft systems, or UASs, and autonomy. NASA's Aeronautics Strategic Thrust in Assured Autonomy defines our vision and approach for supporting the near-term integration of UAS into the National Airspace System, the NAS. This near-term research builds the foundation for the more extensive, transformative changes that autonomous systems will bring in the mid to the far term. UAS and autonomous systems hold great promise for the transformation of our aviation system. We're witnessing the dawn of a new era in aviation innovation, ushering in flight vehicles and operations that are unimaginable today, opening up entirely new commercial markets, much the way that jet engines did 60 years ago. NASA is performing research in transitioning our concepts, technologies, algorithms, and knowledge to the FAA and other stakeholders to help them define the requirements, the regulations, and standards for safe, routine NAS access. Still, there are significant barriers and research challenges associated with the introduction of autonomous systems into our aviation system. This requires these complex systems to be comprehensively evaluated to verify and validate that they're operating as designed, thus allowing the FAA to establish operations and equipment standards. The majority of NASA's near-term research work towards safe UAS integration is focused in three areas. In our sense and avoid research, we're helping to determine performance requirements for a certifiable sense and avoid system to ensure safe separation of UAS with all vehicles operating in the NAS. We're developing secure, robust, reliable communication systems and protocols, as well as addressing the design of ground control stations and displays to maximize pilot effectiveness and safety. To transfer our research findings, NASA has built effective partnerships with key customers, the FAA, the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, RTCA Special Committee 228, and as well as industry and academia. In these partnerships, NASA is playing a key role supporting critical activities from the executive level to our subject matter experts. For midterm applications, NASA is researching novel concepts and technologies to facilitate safe operation of UAS at altitudes that are not actively controlled today. For example, low-altitude operation of small unmanned aircraft. Initial investigations into this trade space have drawn interest among a broad range of traditional and non-traditional aerospace companies and shows promise of opening up entirely new markets and operational models. In order to safely enable widespread civilian UAS operations at lower altitudes, NASA is developing an air traffic management-like system called UAS traffic management. You can think of this as much like today's surface traffic management, where vehicles operate under a rule-based system of roads, lanes, signs, and traffic lights. The growing UAS industry and the varied user base is a harbinger of potential changes that autonomous systems will bring to aviation. But enabling these changes will require substantial research and experimentation to ensure the safety and efficacy of these systems. NASA's long-term research in autonomy will deliver technologies that demonstrate high payoff, integrated applications that advance the safety, efficiency, and flexibility of the NAS and increase competitiveness of the U.S. civil aviation industry. NASA's Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate is a national resource that, through game-changing research advances, enables a growing, sustainable, and transformative aviation system. NASA is partnering with other government agencies, standards development organizations, and industry to achieve routine UAS access into our National Airspace System. Our partnerships are built on clear roles and responsibilities, long and productive working relationships, and close and continuous collaboration and coordination for the specific needs of the UAS integration challenge. As the challenges of UAS operations evolve and the broader implications of integration develop, NASA Aeronautics will continue to advance the research and develop enabling technologies that will assure the safe realization of the transformative benefits of these systems. Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Bonamici, and members of the committee, this concludes my prepared statement. I'll be pleased to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner. Mr. Williams.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Bonamici, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss unmanned aircraft systems, commonly referred to as UAS. The Federal Aviation Administration has successfully integrated new technology into the National Airspace System for more than 50 years while maintaining the safest aviation system in the world. Research and development is absolutely critical to the safe, efficient, and timely integration of new technology like UAS. Interagency partnerships with the Department of Defense, the Department of Commerce, Department of Homeland Security, and NASA have allowed us to leverage our collective assets to advance research and development in the area of unmanned aircraft. Together with RTCA, a Federal Advisory Committee, the FAA is developing standards for command and control radios to detect and avoid systems. The FAA, DoD, and NASA are working closely together to develop a technical standard for UAS detect and avoid systems that will allow UAS to remain well clear of other aircraft. The research, engineering, and development contributions of the DoD and NASA have been essential to developing that standard. Together with NASA and our industry partners, the FAA is developing standards for command and control radios. These radios provide the link between the pilot and the aircraft, and it is essential that they be secure and reliable. NASA and our industry partners are designing and building prototype radios to validate the standard. The FAA plans to use the NASA software to test the ability of those radios to function on a small UAS with size, weight, and power limitations. The FAA is also actively supporting the research and development efforts undertaken by other government entities in the area of unmanned aircraft. Since 2012, the FAA has participated in the DoD Joint Test and Evaluation Effort for UAS airspace integration sponsored by NORAD, NORTHCOM, and the Army. The purpose of the test is to evaluate standardized procedures to effectively conduct manned and UAS operations in the airport environment. The FAA provided engineers, en route controllers, and laboratory assets at the William J. Hughes Technical Center to support DoD's human-in-the-loop simulations. We're also supporting this effort by evaluating the joint test results for potential applicability at civil airports. We look forward to continuing these valuable partnerships and working together with industry and other government agencies to advance UAS research and development. The FAA Technical Center is the nation's premier air transportation system laboratory. It has a specialized UAS simulation laboratory for conducting integrated simulations to research and development, UAS integration procedures and standards. The UAS lab has a variety of test assets, including the ability to link FAA air traffic control systems with high-fidelity unmanned aircraft simulators provided by our industry partners through cooperative research and development agreements. The Technical Center is also playing an important role in data collection from the 6 UAS test sites that were announced in 2013. A significant portion of the test site data analysis is being performed at the Technical Center. A data lead from the Technical Center, regional representatives, and research engineers are also visiting each UAS test site to evaluate how data is captured and maintained. This team will ensure the integrity of the data transferred to the FAA and determine whether additional data collection will facilitate meeting the FAA's research objectives. We continue to work with the test sites to obtain the most valuable information possible to help the FAA integrate UAS into the NAS. We are tremendously grateful for the support and funding Congress has provided to establish a UAS Center of Excellence. Our goal is to create a cost-sharing relationship between academia, industry, and government that will focus on research areas of primary interest to the FAA and the UAS community. The Center of Excellence will perform short and long-term basic and applied research through analysis, development, and prototyping activities. To that end, the FAA solicited proposals from accredited institutions of higher education with their partners and affiliates. We are currently in the process of reviewing proposals and will announce the award recipient within this fiscal year. Together with Congress, we remain committed to the safe, efficient, and timely integration of UAS technology into the national airspace. We look forward to continuing to work with our partners in government and industry to continue making steady progress toward that goal. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my testimony for today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Williams and Dr. Lauber.
Thank you, Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Bonamici, and members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to discuss with you today the work of the National Research Council's Committee on Autonomy Research for Civil Aviation, which I had the pleasure of co-chairing along with John Paul Clark from Georgia Institute of Technology. Our final report was issued last summer after about 18 months of effort and was done at the request of NASA's Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate. We were specifically charged with developing a national agenda for research and development that would support the introduction of what we call increasingly autonomous elements into our civil aviation system. Copies of the summary of our report have been provided to you. We recognize that several key characteristics of the civil aviation system set the context for our study, and first and foremost is safety. Our air transportation system operates at unprecedented levels of safety, and it is clear that the introduction of increasingly autonomous capabilities into that system will be acceptable only if they preserve or if further enhance this high level of safety and reliability. Secondly, we had to recognize that the diversity of aircraft, ground systems, and personnel that comprise our civil aviation system, because so-called legacy aircraft and systems will continue to operate for the foreseeable future, it's clear that civil airspace must safely and efficiently accommodate everything from Piper Cubs designed in the 1930s to increasingly autonomous unmanned rotary and fixed-wing vehicles whose design and applications are continually evolving. Today's aviation system sets the baseline for the system of tomorrow, and in this context, autonomy is a characteristic or feature of future aviation automation systems that enable operations over extended periods of time without direct human supervision or intervention. This has some profound implications for urgent research and development in machine vision, perception, and cognition to provide the functional equivalent of a see and avoid capability, which is a cornerstone for collision avoidance in our national aviation system. And this is but one example of what we mean when we talk of increasingly autonomous systems, systems that will evolve to perform more and more of the functions presently provided by human pilots, controllers, and other skilled aviation personnel. Our report identifies 8 technical barriers, including such issues as cyber-physical security, and we've also identified 4 barriers associated with regulation and certification, which include issues such as airspace access. And finally, we note in our report barriers related to public policy, law, and regulation, and very importantly, social concerns about privacy and safety of autonomous systems. Our recommended research agenda consists of 8 broad tasks, of which we consider the first 4 to be the most urgent and most difficult. These include fundamental issues about how to characterize the behavior of systems that change dynamically over time. Modeling and simulation will be of fundamental importance to the development and deployment of these systems. And finally, we discuss a wide range of research issues involving validation, verification, and certification. The remaining 4 research areas include issues having to do with the safe use of open source hardware and software, and a re-examination and redefinition of the role of humans in the operation of these systems. We note in our report that this research program is best carried out by multiple government, academic, and industrial entities and will require effective coordination at all levels. Civil aviation is on the threshold of profound changes because of rapid evolution of increasingly autonomous systems. As often happens with rapidly evolving technology, early adapters sometimes get caught up in the excitement of the moment, greatly exaggerating the promise of things to come and greatly underestimating costs in terms of money, time, and in some cases, unintended consequences or complications. While there's little doubt that over the long run, the potential benefits of increasingly autonomous systems in civil aviation will indeed be great, there should be equally little doubt that getting there while maintaining the safety and efficiency of U.S. civil aviation will be no easy matter. We believe that the barriers in the research program that we've identified is a vital next step, and that concludes my testimony. I'll be happy to respond to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lauber. And Mr. Wynn.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Bonamici, and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to address the importance of UAS research and development. I'm speaking on behalf of the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International, the world's largest nonprofit organization devoted exclusively to advancing the unmanned systems and robotics community. AUVSI has been the voice of unmanned systems for more than 40 years, and currently we have more than 7,500 members, including over 600 corporate members. As you know, UAS increase human potential, allowing us to execute dangerous or difficult tasks safely and efficiently, whether it is assisting first responders with search and rescue missions, advancing scientific research, or helping farmers more efficiently spray their crops. UAS are capable of saving time, money, and most importantly, lives. However, the benefits of this technology do not stop there. It has incredible potential to create jobs and stimulate the U.S. economy as well. In 2013, AUVSI released an economic impact study which found that within the first 10 years following UAS integration, the UAS industry will create more than 100,000 new jobs and have an economic impact of more than $82 billion. The benefits I just outlined can be recognized immediately once we put the necessary rules in place to enable commercial operations. We understand that a notice of proposed rulemaking for small UAS from the Federal Aviation Administration is now expected any day. It cannot come soon enough. Establishing rules will also eliminate the current approach of regulating by exemption, whereby the FAA issues exemptions on a case-by-case basis for some commercial UAS operations under Section 333 of the FAA Modernization and Reform Act of 2012. While we're here today to discuss the critical role of UAS research and development, the fact is we don't need a lot of additional research to permit low-altitude, line-of-sight operations. A variety of commercial applications can be safely authorized right away, and we look forward to working with the FAA to get this done as expeditiously as possible. As we look beyond the initial phase of UAS integration, we will need robust research to further expand access to the airspace and address some of the challenges that exist to flying beyond line of sight. Areas requiring more research include sense and avoid, command and control, and autonomous operations. The advancement of UAS technology needs to be a collaborative effort between industry and government. While the industry is investing millions in research and the federal government has various research projects underway, we can all do this better and in a more coordinated fashion. The challenges we jointly face call for a national leadership initiative that places UAS integration into the National Airspace System and all relevant R&D at the top of our country's priority list. Importantly, the benefits of this research extend well beyond UAS. It will make the entire National Airspace System safer for all aircraft, manned and unmanned. A deeper national commitment to UAS R&D has three main components. First, the industry and its government partners need a holistic research plan that coordinates all UAS research. While the FAA designated test sites went operational in 2014, too many questions about the collection, sharing, and analysis of test data remain unanswered. Second, the federal government needs more resources to coordinate UAS research. The FAA was given $14.9 million to support its UAS research this year, which is up from previous years. However, given the scope of the research needed to advance UAS integration, we feel this figure is insufficient. Third, the government must have a transparent intellectual property protections, provide transparent intellectual property protections. Companies on the cutting edge of UAS innovations won't participate in FAA or other governmental research activities if their intellectual property isn't safeguarded. The FAA has taken significant steps to advance the UAS integration, but much work remains to be done. AUVSI members stand ready to collaborate with the appropriate government agencies to accelerate the needed R&D efforts that will allow for the safe integration of UAS into the National Airspace System. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wynn. Let me say to members, we've had a series of votes just called. We're going to try to finish our witness testimony before we go vote, and then we will resume the hearing immediately after the last vote. So we'll go now to Mr. Gwynn, who I think has the most fun job of the day, and you're recognized for your testimony.
Thank you very much, Chairman Smith and Ranking Member Bonamici. Thank you, committee, here for having me. It's an honor to come speak to you guys about something that I'm very passionate about. And I think what I'd like to do is just talk to you guys about kind of the stalemate that we are in today between, no one's going to disagree to the benefits that UAS can provide, to the economic, the efficiencies in business, the job creation, the revenue that can come into our country. And then at the same time, nobody's going to argue with the fact that we must be extremely thoughtful, considerate, and careful in integrating these systems into the national airspace, because obviously the FAA has a second-to-none safety record, and there's no question that we must maintain that. So I guess for me today, I'd like to just talk a little bit about, where can we start? What can we do now that allows us to bridge that gap, between the chicken and the egg? So, we have the FAA test sites, which are great, but at the same time, it's a little bit of testing in a bubble. And, to ask research and development companies to rapidly iterate their technology and have to, every couple months, figure out a time when they can get into a test site, travel with their entire engineering team. Did they accidentally leave the spectrum analyzer at the lab? Now someone has to fly home to get that. So it doesn't allow for very rapid innovation, which is obviously not going to let us, keep up with the other countries in this world that are absolutely reaping the rewards and the benefits of this technology. So, additionally, testing it in test sites is not necessarily going to give us the necessary data and the logged flight hours to figure out what the hurdles are, what the roadblocks are to safely integrating these systems into the NAS. And so I think what can be done in the meantime, and as you'll see here, this is something I'm going to talk about today when it comes to very small systems. This is the Parrot Bebop, which weighs just over a pound, and it's actually an incredibly advanced UAV or drone. And so what I wanted to talk about is I think we can start somewhere, and instead of having to regulate and integrate 20, 30, and 40-pound systems or 50-pound systems into our national airspace all at one time, what I would at least bring to discussion is the possibility of taking very small, lightweight systems, as many other countries in the world have done. There's somewhat of a precedence around sub-2 kilogram systems because they carry the least amount of kinetic energy. They have the least risk-based approach, the least chance of causing any harm. And so all right, we all saw a drone fly. Fantastic, incredible.
I was hoping you'd fight over the whole room, not just in one location.
Well, you said no haircuts.
I think
we could have.
I said no haircuts earlier, but he could have done it.
We could have arranged that. So no, so the point that I want to make today is that if we start somewhere, as many other countries have, with the smallest, lightest weight systems, we're basically using a proportional and risk-based system for regulation so that by integrating today or as soon as possible for commercial use, small sub 2 kilogram systems, we can now start gathering thousands of hours of flight time, figuring out what are the issues when you're actually using these things in the national airspace, not just at these FAA test sites. And I think that's something that could potentially bridge our gap while we're figuring out, okay, now how do we integrate the next heavier class? Great, we learned a lot from these little tiny ones, and while we're learning a lot from the little tiny ones, we're capturing the vast majority of the economic benefit of commercial UAVs. They can do power line inspection. They can have geofences set up. They can return to their home location and land themselves. They log every parameter of the flight in real time. These small systems can be saving firefighters' lives. They can be saving the lives of people that are flying full-scale helicopters over power lines simply to take pictures of the power line. They can be used for a myriad of situations where they can save human lives. So that's all I wanted to say today is that, you know, maybe we can start somewhere, integrate the lightweight systems, use that for data collection so that we can see what happens in the real world, and also satisfy some of that economic benefit that all those other countries are experiencing right now.
Thank you, Mr. Gwynn. Good suggestions. Dr. Hensman.
Sure. Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Bonamici, members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to be here today. As you can see, it's sort of hard to follow the demo, but as you can see, UAVs are actually one of the most exciting areas in aerospace, and particularly aeronautics today. You know, the same technologies that we use to enable these cell phones, the miniaturization of processing sensors, coupled with flight control algorithms, et cetera, enable incredible power you can see in the stability of the vehicle, high performance in very small packages. Today, in my office back at MIT in the basement, I have 2 teams of students building new UAV concepts. So it's a really exciting area. The thing to remember about UAV integration in the NAS is that there's a huge spectrum of UAV sizes, ranging from a few grams up to hundreds of thousands of pounds. And it's important to note that one size isn't going to fit all. We have to have different concepts of operation for integrating different types of UAVs into the NAS. I'll break it into just 4 categories. We have the small UAS operating at low altitudes within line of sight of the operator. We actually know how to do that today. We've been doing it for years, and we really just need to get going and get that enabled. That's what you've heard from some of this. But there are multiple other categories. You have high altitude UAVs, sort of the typical UAVs the military will want to operate. We also sort of know how to do that. We've sort of developed operating rules. They're normally operating above where most of the manned airplanes are. It's not too tough a problem. The 2 more challenging areas are small UAVs that are being operated beyond the line of sight of the operator. So you don't have the visual feedback. You're going to rely more on algorithms. You're going to rely more on the technology. And the toughest area is actually UAVs whose mission require that they operate in the same airspace that manned airplanes need to operate. And frankly, we don't have good what we call concepts of operations for either the small UAS beyond line of sight or the larger UAS operating in that airspace. There's been so much focus on the small UAS that we really haven't done the research to enable the concepts of operation. In unique concepts of operation, in order to guide the research, to develop the standards, to work out the rules, to figure out the human factors. You know, for example, if we have UAVs operating as IFR aircraft in the system today, how does the air traffic controller think about that UAV? How do they communicate with them? Do they call the operator up on a landline? Is there some relay? What happens when there's a loss of communication? How do they think about it? And it's actually a tough thing for the FAA because there are a lot of policy issues. For example, who do you give priority to? Do you give priority to the manned airplane or do you give priority to the UAV airplane? Well, we'd normally say give it to the manned airplane, but what if the UAV airplane is doing a life-critical mission and the manned airplane is on a sightseeing tour? Who should have priority? So there's a lot of questions here. So I mean, most of my comments are my prepared remarks, but I just say I think the takeaway is that we really need to develop the CONOPS, and we're really behind the 8 ball. We really haven't been working the harder problems of the fully integrated UAS in some of these issues of beyond line of sight. I would note that I am encouraged by, for example, the work that NASA has started on UTM concept beyond line of sight. So they're starting to attack some of those problems. So thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. Dr. Hansen, thank you for those comments. The committee is going to stand in recess until after the series of 3 votes, and when we return, we'll go immediately to our questions. And sorry for the inconvenience. I hope we're back within about 30 minutes if you all want to take a break. Sure. Until then.
Thanks.
The Science Committee will reconvene, and we'll now begin our questionings, and I'll recognize myself for that purpose. Dr. Wagner, Mr. Williams, let me direct my first question to you all, which is this. What is a realistic deadline for integrating the drones into the National Airspace System? I mentioned in my opening statement that it appears that the deadline has slipped, but what can drone users and even the American people, the wider audience, what is a realistic deadline for that integration? Dr. Wagner and then Mr. Williams.
So, Chairman, I would answer that right now we do have a level of integration. So as for public aircraft, they're flying every day. NASA does research, but we're also users, and we have unmanned aircraft. So for civil applications, we're working very closely with the FAA and RTCA 228 to verify and validate these key technology barriers, the sense and avoid, the radio communications, the displays for the ground control stations, to allow the FAA to determine these minimum operational performance standards.
And Mr. Williams, when might we expect the FAA to propose some rules?
Well, the FAA is working closely with our administration partners in the rulemaking process, and we're doing everything we can to get that small unmanned aircraft rule out. But our main focus is to get it right. Okay. The rulemaking process is deliberative. I
understand. When do you think you might get that out?
I, at this point, can't give you a firm deadline. We're still working on the
Do you have a goal in mind? I mean, you've got a lot of people across the United States waiting, and do you have any kind of a working deadline or a working goal?
Our goals are to get it out as quickly as we can, as long as we get it out right.
Okay. I mean, is it likely to be this year or next year?
I can't speculate. My own personal hope is that we get it out as soon as possible. But it's got to go through the regulatory process that has been put in place by Congress, and we're working our way through that.
Okay. And I'm going to press you one more time. You're slipping off my question here. How long does a regulatory process normally take in a situation like this?
Well, you got to understand, this is a very complex rulemaking.
Never mind. I can tell I'm not going to get the answer that I was hoping for, but we'll take your word for expediting the process as much as we can. Dr. Lauber, you mentioned this in your testimony a while ago, but what technologies need to be prioritized before the NAS integration? What are the top priorities?
I referred to what we believe is probably the highest, and I think a couple of the other witnesses also mentioned the need for technology that provides the equivalent of see and avoid, the sense and avoid technology that needs to be in place for full integration of a wide range of these vehicles into the aviation system. That would be the highest
priority. Okay, thank you. Mr. Wynn and Mr. Gwynn, what is the private sector contributing to this integration process? We have the government on one side, maybe not on one side, but as a part of the process. We have the private sector as part of the process as well. But so what are the contributions of the private sector to the integration?
My belief, Mr. Chairman, is that the industry is going to bring the lion's share of the technology solutions, as it should. Companies like 3D Robotics will at the end of the day, they're constructing the devices, they're developing the software, and not just directly in the industry. The microprocessor speeds are getting faster, et cetera, et cetera. So this was really the spirit of my testimony was industry should really be doing the lion's share of this. We should be proving the concepts to the satisfaction of the regulators in this R&D process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gwynn. Mr. Gwynn, anything to add?
Yeah, so not to give a specific example, of course, these companies are integrating and innovating these advanced technologies such as sense and avoid and geofencing and return to home technology. But to give a specific example of what 3D robotics is doing is, if I fly my drone today outside, you can log into droneshare.com and watch my entire flight automatically. So if I choose any of our members around the world, choose to make their profile public, every single time you fly, that log file is uploaded automatically from your smart device into the cloud to droneshare.com, and we're able to now collect tens, if not hundreds of thousands of hours of data on what are the fringe cases, right? That's what we have to figure out. What are the fringe cases when you actually start integrating hundreds of thousands of these systems into airspace?
You mentioned the drone we saw a while ago in the room was a fairly sophisticated device. What did it cost? What's its range? What's its use?
So that's more of a hobby grade drone. It's called the Bebop. It's incredibly advanced in that it's got a full high definition camera that displays on your smart device. You can either fly it with a smart device or with a long range controller. It's got barometric altimeters, it's got optical flow sensors to look at the ground and maintain positioning, it's got accelerometers, gyroscopes, and a full computer that's a flight control system on board, and it's $499.
And what's the range?
The range, depending on if you're using a smartphone, you're restricted to kind of Wi-Fi range.
Yeah.
But if you use their controller, you can get up to a kilometer of range with something like that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hansman. You mentioned during your testimony what your students are working on in the classroom, and I just wondered if we can expect any kind of breakthroughs and maybe you might give some examples of what they're working on as well, but you've obviously seen it from a hands-on approach.
Yeah, so I'll just give you a couple quick examples. One vehicle that our students prototyped 2 years ago is a small UAV that can do a 1-hour surveillance mission, which is launched out of an anti-missile flare canister on a military airplane. So it's a 2-inch by 2.5-inch by 7-inch package, gets shot out at 300 Gs. This was a concept that nobody in the Air Force thought would work. The students actually demonstrated it. It's now a developmental program where the vehicles they developed are being launched out of F-16s right now at Edwards.
Amazing. I hope that's not classified information.
No.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's intriguing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for your answers, and now I'll recognize the gentlewoman from Oregon, Ms. Bonamici, for her questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our very accomplished panel of witnesses. As you heard in the opening remarks I gave, Oregon does have 3 test sites through the Pan-Pacific UAS test range, led by the University of Alaska Fairbanks. We've talked a lot about the benefits of the technology. One of the concerns that I've heard from constituents in Oregon who are working in the developing industry is that there's still some problems with advancing the testing of their products, especially true for small companies that don't have a solid revenue stream, and the test ranges, and I think Mr. Gwynn suggested this test ranges, despite being set up to provide a space where the development can take place, may be prohibitively expensive for small companies and there may be other logistical barriers. So, Mr. Gwynn, could you expand just a little bit on how the FAA could work with the test ranges to best address these concerns? And then I want to allow time for a couple other questions.
Sure. So really quickly, right now, there's not really a set understanding of how you even schedule a time to go to the range. There's no way to log into a system and say, when's the next available day? It's not a matter of them being too busy because, quite frankly, there's not a whole lot of places or companies using these test range. It's more a matter of what is the process? And there's a lot of bureaucracy surrounding getting even the approval to go to a test range and test fly for a few days. So you don't know if that's going to be 30 days or 2 months.
Well, and I'm going to ask Mr. Williams about that too. But first, I want to ask Mr. Nguyen a question. Thanks for your association work and what you've been doing. I want to echo the comments already made by the chairman and some of my colleagues about the concerns about the rulemaking. And somebody made a comment about the proposed notice of proposed rulemaking is expected. So we're encouraged to hear that news. I actually sent a letter to Secretary Fox, joined by several colleagues, who are concerned about the timeline. Of course, we want this to be done right, and we don't want to jeopardize safety, but we're concerned about not only workforce development and those challenges of recruiting people into this industry if we don't have that certainty, but also for these new companies attracting private investment. So, Mr. Nguyen, have you noticed some particular challenges because of the lack of certainty in attracting venture capital to the industry?
Oh, absolutely, ma'am, and I thank you for the question. If I'm investing money in a project like this, I want to know what the go-to-market strategy is. I want to know what the return on the investment is. If I don't know when I can fly and when I can pursue some of the commercial opportunities that are out there, it's a big barrier. So there is, I think, already the fact that there's money flowing in, there's tremendous product being developed. Says that this is a great investment opportunity and a great business opportunity and a job creator, which is something we need to be paying attention to. And so while we want to get this right, we want to do it once, for the various levels, and we're on a certain trajectory here. We think that there are opportunities immediately that require very little regulation, and some of the countries abroad have demonstrated this success.
Thank you, and I know Mr. Nguyen talked about that. So Mr. Williams, you heard Mr. Nguyen talk about some of the possible ways of moving forward. Of course, it's not a one-size-fits-all because of the various sizes and capabilities and ranges. But I wanted to ask you first about the testing sites. Some companies have suggested maybe performing initial tests at a range where their safety can be demonstrated, but then maybe performing additional tests closer to home. Could that outline potential changes, or could you talk about some potential changes that could allow some more flexibility, especially for the small developers? And then I also wanted you to respond to the concern about the small companies having access and being able to test.
So first, the small companies have access to our experimental airworthiness approval process, which goes back to the manned aircraft process. It's the same regulations that are applied. We're in the process of updating that to make it a little more user-friendly for unmanned aircraft operators to get through that process. On the test site front, we have set up a program to enable all of the test sites, should they choose to do so, to have the authority to issue experimental airworthiness certificates on behalf of the FAA, thereby streamlining the process of getting a new aircraft into the testing phase at one of the test sites. So we think that's a significant benefit that the test sites can offer to the industry. And we're constantly looking at ways to streamline our processes and work to enable these new companies to test their aircraft in a safe and by the rules way.
Well, thank you, and I see my time has expired, so I will submit my Section 333 exemption question for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Ms. Bonamici. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas, is recognized for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would direct my question, I guess, to Dr. Wagner and Mr. Nguyen and Mr. Gwynn and Mr. Hansen. In recent years, agriculture has been one of the bright spots in our nation's economy. Can you speak for a moment about the potential applications in agricultural settings and what benefits these might provide for both producers and consumers? Whoever.
Well, I could start. I have just a little bit of experience in what we saw some high school students do this year, who had the challenge of developing an unmanned aircraft to surveil, I think it was about a 100-square-mile farm, a large farm, of corn for European corn borers. These kids, incredible kids from all over the country, came up with a number of different solutions. But they showed that there were viable solutions that were affordable, usable for the farmer, for precision agriculture, where they could precisely locate where there were issues either with fertilizer or pesticide where they needed to be applied, and could precisely do that. So we saw that as an opportunity that shows that there's a market out there for that work, and that's part of what is behind our more midterm work on this UAS traffic management. So allowing a farmer or a commercial operation to go into a farm and do that kind of surveillance operations at low altitudes very safely and in a way that would be very cost effective.
So ag applications are already ongoing in other parts of the world. In Japan, for example, where you have very small rice paddies, we're seeing applications there. It's considered one of the #1 applications. There's significant interest on the part of agricultural departments to use these vehicles, and in fact, they're frustrated by the rule like everybody else, in that's difficult for them to get exemptions to go off and do experiments. So it's one of the big opportunities spaces.
And so, if I can maybe provide a specific example of a way that even one of these very small, lightweight systems can provide real benefit to the farmer. So we had one of the top private vineyards in Napa Valley contact us and say, hey, we've been hearing about these drones. What can we do with them? And, you know, everyone talks about the super high-tech ability to do hyperspectral imagery and look for water damage and, you know, pesticide. But even if you just take it to the really simple level, most of these farmers have not ever seen a very high-resolution look-down image of their vineyards. So we went out, we took one of our sub-2 kg systems, flew around, took a lot of pictures looking down in the back of the truck at the farm, stitched those together into a photo mosaic, which allowed him to see a very high-resolution image of the crop. And for the generations that they've had that vineyard, he looked down and said, wow, look over here in the corner of the vineyard here, where see how this is actually a little darker green than this whole area? Because you can't see that when you're walking the rows of the vineyard, because when you're up close, you don't see the minute differences in the green. This must be the fact that there's a slight elevation change there, which is sucking more water down to that area. That means we need to harvest these grapes 2 to 3 weeks earlier than the rest of the vineyard. He then walked us out, took some grapes from that area, took some grapes from the rest of the vineyard, squished them in a bag, and you could clearly taste the difference between the two sets. And he said, before today, we never knew that existed, and that happened in 2 hours.
Congressman, thank you for the question. The numbers that AUVSI put together in 2013, the $82 billion in the first 10 years after we get access to the National Airspace System, we think as high as 80% of that could be agriculture.
Absolutely. Dr. Williams, I come from a state where the Chamber of Commerce likes for us to use the phrase significant weather events occur on a common place in a common way. And my home state's making a lot of investments in weather-related research. And one of the things that I understand it's a challenge is this requirement to obtain a certificate of authorization, a COA, or a Section 33 exemption, which can be kind of challenging and cumbersome. What's the FAA doing to expedite the approval process for this kind of thing?
We're actually working in both areas to approve the processing of the approvals. Most of the, understand the Section 333 approvals are for the aircraft. The COA process is for the airspace. In order to operate an unmanned aircraft, you can't really comply with the see and avoid rules. So we have to give you either a waiver or an authorization to do that. That's the COA process. That process is undergoing a revamp inside of the FAA. We're in the process of building a new software to interact with the folks using it, and we think that's going to be a major step forward. We have achieved tremendous amount of progress with our public partners in accelerating their approvals. We've reduced the amount of overhead for many of the frequent users like NASA. They have a much easier way forward. On the 333 side, we're also working hard to streamline that process. We put together a Tiger team that's in the process of developing a streamlined and more efficient process to move those forward quicker. You got to understand the exemption process was never intended as a approval mechanism. It was intended to deal with exceptions. special cases. So we're trying to have to make that up as we go, so to speak, to figure out a way to accelerate it while still it's a regulatory process. So there are rules that have to be met as we go through it. So we're trying to find the right balance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Lipinski, is recognized for his question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing. Something we're all very interested in, and it's critical that we get a handle on this. We don't want to, on the one hand, we want innovation to move forward and all the opportunities that are brought out for business purposes and other purposes from UAS, but we know there's a lot of issues also that need to be dealt with. And so I wanted to ask Mr. Williams, and anyone else can jump in after Mr. Williams if they have anything to add. I want to talk about the concern about the number of UAS near misses being reported. My district includes Midway Airport, so it's especially important to me. Also, I have Lewis University Airport in my district. So given the rapid increase in number of small UAS in use, both for hobby and commercial purposes, what's being done to better understand the risk of UAS collision, and what's being done to track near misses?
So we're in the process of building a tracking system modeled on the way we track the laser incidents that have been going on. We are also working hard on an education campaign to try to, we believe that most of the people that are flying these aircraft near airports just don't understand the area they're flying in and the rules about where they can and can't fly. So we have in partnership with the Small UAV Coalition, the Unmanned Aircraft Vehicles, International AUVSI, and the Academy of Model Aeronautics, we have a campaign ongoing called Know Before You Fly, that we're working to find any means we can to educate the public about where they fly, because primarily the FAA is interested in compliance with our rules, and we believe the best way to achieve that compliance is through education. So we're working hard to make that happen. On the research side, I'm sorry, you had another question about the research?
What's being better done to understand the risk of UAS collision?
Right. So we actually have started this year a research initiative to look into what the potential is for, or we're really to assess the risk of an unmanned aircraft to a manned aircraft. And that project is just getting off the ground this year, and we're accelerating it thanks to the additional funding that Congress provided us in our research budget this year. We should be able to accelerate that and move it forward more rapidly than we had been able to.
Thank you. Anything else that any witnesses think should be done?
I just
being done?
Just wanted to emphasize that we thank the FAA for their help with this campaign to educate. I think in many instances it really is an education challenge today. Obviously, commercial operations are not allowed at this stage until we get a rule. But the education campaign is really about keeping the UAS under 400 feet, 5 miles from an airport, within line of sight, stay away from crowds. It's basic common sense, and we think that in many instances it's just a question of education. We've had tremendous response from the aviation community on this. We've got new partners in NBAA, EAA, et cetera. Many of the organizations are stepping in and helping us get that word out.
Thank you. One other thing I want to move on to before my time runs out, about the test sites. The FAA established 6 test sites to enable UAS research, and these sites are operating under an agreement that may restrict the FAA's role in directing research. So I want to ask Mr. Williams, what steps is the FAA taking to ensure that the test sites are being used to address the nation's top research priorities, and are there any barriers that need to be addressed?
Back in the fall, we released to the test sites a list of over 100 research areas that we believed we could benefit from having them look into. I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding about what they can and can't do at our behest. Our only rule is that through the procurement rules, we have to, if we're going to direct contractors, and the other transaction agreements we have with them amount to a contract between them and us. If we're going to direct work, we have to pay for it. But we can also agree to work together with in-kind resources through these agreements. So, but the bottom line is to all of it, all we have to do is document it in those agreements, and we can work together on any research project that is of interest to those test sites. And I believe that we've communicated that to them, and I believe that they understand the situation pretty well at this point.
All right, thank you. I have other questions that we'll submit for the record. Yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lipinski. On behalf of a new member of the committee, Barbara Comstock of Virginia, without objection, I'd like to put a letter from a Michael Cronmiller in the record. And without objection, so entered. The gentleman from California, Mr. Rohrbacher, is recognized for questions.
Thank you very much. Now let me see if I'm getting all of this straight now. The FAA actually will approve Mr. Gwyn's drones, their design and their capabilities, and approve them to actually go in the air before you are permitted to fly them. Is that correct? Mr. Gwyn? Mr. Williams, who can answer that?
Sir, they're approved. The two processes run in parallel, so that when the approval to fly the aircraft without an airworthiness certificate that's done through the Section 333 exemption process is complete.
Now you say that approval is based on the design of the aircraft and its capabilities, is that right?
Yes, and the operations. And then they come in and say, okay, we want to operate it in this particular area.
Right.
And our air traffic organization assesses whether or not it's safe for them to operate. So they're looking for, conflicts with manned aircraft.
Okay, so this is both FAA in both cases. One is the safety of the equipment itself, and then the safety of the actual instance that they want to use it, this specific situation. And are we having any trouble, Mr. Gwyn, with the actual approval of the system itself, meaning your crafts that you could bring before for them for approval? Is that, am I understanding that, do you think that should be streamlined or?
Yes, sir. So when one of our customers wants to use, say, a system for, looking at photomosaics of a farm so that they can see where the water's going and when to pick the grapes, they need to take that system and get a Section 333 exemption, which is where the FAA determines, is this aircraft...
Well, once you've gotten that from this, to do that...
Well, first you have to get that.
That's
what I mean. So far, of all the companies...
But after that, you don't have to get it again, right? Is that correct?
For the Section 333. So far, 14 have been granted.
Out of how many?
Is that correct, 14?
Out of how many requests?
Out of everyone in the country that wants to fly their drones.
Oh, is that right? 14?
Right, but the process is being improved, and they're going to be coming out a little more frequently.
So it's difficult first to get it, 14 out of however many thousand.
All right.
And then once you have a Section 333, you have to get the certificate of authorization to fly in a specific area,
So
which is...
what we have here is technology, and the technological capabilities are far surpassed the ability of making decisions about standards and rulemaking, general rulemaking, and that's what we have to catch up with. This isn't the first time that's happened in history, I'm sure, and I hope that, can you tell me, can anyone here tell me which is more dangerous, a small privately owned airplane flying from here to there or a drone flying from here to there? Anybody want to?
Well, I've had several friends that have been in helicopter crashes, actually specifically going out the side of the door, taking pictures of power lines. So, I can't speak to the factual evidence here, but in my estimation, having a 2 or 3 pound drone flying over a national grid power line taking photos, if it were to fail in any way, shape, or form, it doesn't have to worry about auto-rotating down to the ground when they're already flying outside the chart. So all it does is bounce off the power line, fall to the ground, you take another one out of the truck and keep inspecting. So my guess is that would be much more safe and would allow us to start saving lives today.
We've actually done analysis on this, and it really depends on the size of the drone. So for a small drone, the risk to people on the ground and to people in the air is much lower.
Has there ever been anybody hurt from a crashing drone, on the ground?
I mean, there's been, ouch, you hit me in the head with that drone, but,
all right. Let me ask you about how the FAA is planning to do this. Is this testing areas, test sites that have been established and to help you try to determine whether or not these pieces of equipment should be approved. Could somebody tell me what they do at those test sites?
Well, the primary intention for the test sites is to provide an opportunity for manufacturers to do their developmental test and evaluation in support of moving forward toward approval.
And that's what we had spent $11 million on that, providing that to you last year, and now that budget's been increased. Is that right?
No, sir. There hasn't been any appropriation to the FAA to directly support those test sites. Okay. We funded it out of our existing appropriation.
Is it possible that when we have these companies that are seeking profit, which is a good thing, and think they have technology, which is a good technology, do you think that in order to facilitate and to move the process along, that maybe it would be good to have the companies reimburse the government for the specific tests, or be able to certify certain people to conduct those tests other than government employees?
I believe that's the actual intent of the test sites. The cost for running the test sites is currently being borne by the states who sponsored them, and they're getting compensation from the companies who come to them for testing, or the government. In a couple of cases, there have been some government testing done there. The FAA doesn't fund the test site operating costs. Okay. They're independently funded.
We've only had 14 of these things approved, so I can't imagine we've had much revenue so far, but I would hope that...
So there's a small number of companies covering those costs, which is why it's prohibitively expensive to go to those sites to test, versus going to Canada or Mexico, our neighbors.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And by the way, just a note, my family, which are catching a plane back to California, just happened to be coming in at the time when that drone was flying around, and I guess my son got an interesting opinion of what his father does for a living. So.
And it kind of shows you how these vehicles actually stimulate the interest of the sort of next generation.
Young people.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rohrbacher. The gentlewoman from Connecticut, Ms. Esty, is recognized for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member for having this hearing today, and thank you all for your testimony. Unmanned aircraft systems have already significantly impacted, as we've discussed today, particularly in the field of agriculture, changing the way farmers do business and increasing yields and decreasing the use of pesticides, and this is all a very good thing. And coming from the state of Connecticut, where we've been longtime leaders in aviation and aerospace, we are very excited about these opportunities. But we also live in an incredibly congested airspace. And some of us, that includes Mr. Lipinski and I, serve on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, where we're having hearings on the same issue. So I'd like to turn to that a little bit and get you to help us understand how, on the R&D side, what are the risks we should be looking at? What should be the research priorities to avoid those issues, which are a little different than the agricultural setting. Those are the what do you deal with LaGuardia to Logan issues, and particularly as we follow up on the exciting possibility of improving our infrastructure, the grid, looking at lines. These are very important opportunities, but again, they do pose risks, particularly in the congested airspace. So anyone who wants to jump in and help us guide through research capabilities, what are the risks we face, and on the R&D side, what should we be prioritizing to address those risks outside of regulation, actually understanding?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So from a risk standpoint, if you look at the risks of UAV operations, we don't have the risk to the passengers on board. So the two risk areas are ground impact hazard, people being hurt by drones coming out of the sky, or mid-air collision risk. That's right. The ground impact hazard, you can do the analysis, and it really scales significantly by vehicle mass. So and studies have been done, and you can look at the risk versus the reliability required to compare those with manned airplanes and set standards there. From the airborne collision risk standpoint, it also scales with size. So for very, very small UAVs, we design airplanes so that they can take bird strikes. So an interesting research question is, what is the threshold mass for a UAV for which the existing regulatory guidance on bird strike criteria would allow you to work there? Above that size, you need some method to separate the airplanes. The easy thing is to do segregation. Okay, and that's where we're working now. The hard is to come up with, as I said before, concepts of operation that would allow you to operate in the same airspace and be coordinated in some way. And that's really where we got to work, is the concepts.
And I would completely agree with that. And I think that's why many other countries have said, you know, if it's less than 2 kg, it's going to be similar to a bird strike, which planes are already designed to handle in that worst case scenario if that were to happen. And I think the other thing that we need to do, like I said before, is, you know, by going to FAA test sites with a team of PhDs flying a perfectly assembled drone, we're not figuring out what the fringe cases are. We're not figuring out what the real risks are when you integrate thousands of these systems. And the concept of integrating thousands and thousands of systems that are far beyond what would be considered a bird strike is extremely scary. So to me, starting with those lightweight systems so that we can collect all that data and start figuring out, okay, here are the fringe cases, here are the failure points, here are the risks. Now, how do we mitigate those for the next set of heavier aircraft?
And I might add, if I may, that one of the 4 high priority, most difficult research projects that we identified in our study had to do with these very issues: the question of verification, validation, and certification, and how you go about setting appropriate standards of risk that apply to these light, small UAS systems in a world that was basically created to deal with manned aircraft systems of much larger mass. It's a very different world and demands very high priority in our view.
And as Dr. Hansman mentioned, the harder problem of interoperability, particularly with the larger aircraft. So that's something that NASA has taken on, and we're doing that research. So the sense and avoid work, but also as the sense and avoid systems work, how you display that information to the pilot so that they can make informed decisions. And we're doing research in both of those areas in support of the FAA's standards development.
Thank you. That's all very helpful. And those who have thoughts on how this might integrate with the next-gen system, and if there are issues around UAS that we should be thinking about as we're addressing next-gen as part of the FAA authorization, I'd love to follow up with you.
I'd just say we need to leverage off of our investment in ADS-B and some of the comm architectures.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Esty. The gentleman from California, Mr. Knight, is recognized for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for having this esteemed panel. I have just a couple statements, maybe a quick question. You know, the UAS systems have helped quite a bit. I know that these aren't something new. They've been around for 50 or 60 years. I can remember the HIMAT program, which helped us get into the 4th and 5th generation fighters that we have today. And also, I appreciate what they do to help pilots have a safer flight. The GCAS system that we are working on right now with the United States Air Force and the Navy, we put that on a UAS system because flying an airplane into the ground was not what a pilot wanted to do. So you put that on a UAS, and hopefully the software worked, which it did, and the plane didn't crash, and then you might get a test pilot to do that. But my questions are more in line with privacy and how Congress is going to move forward in the next 20 years, especially when it comes to law enforcement. Law enforcement has been part of the UAS discussion over the last 10 years especially. If you have a helicopter that is chasing a bad guy and he flurs that area down there, we have decided that that's okay. But if you used a UAS, we have decided that that's probably not okay. And so the discussion is going to go, and I can already see, Mr. Wynn, you probably want to answer this, is how do we go about that? How is the lawmaking, how is the rulemaking going to be when we talk about UASs in the law enforcement arena?
Well, I think that's a great question. Thank you. And I think for law enforcement, it's probably the easiest to solve because you just simply say these are the rules for whether or not you can engage with a UAS and whether or not that evidence can be, admitted into a hearing, because obviously the point of law enforcement is to stop crime And the only way to stop crime is to be able to convict, and the only way to be able to convict is to use admissible evidence, right? So I think that one's pretty simple to say, this is what's allowed, this is not what's not allowed. You have notice of proposed rulemaking, people vote on it and decide. I think the stickier point is the guy that's not being regulated, the hobbyist who's using these systems to peek into somebody's window, right? And there's a lot of people that have those concerns, and they're valid concerns. But I would hearken this back to when phone manufacturers started putting cameras in cell phones. People were very concerned about this. Samsung, as a matter of fact, it was a rule that you could not have a camera-equipped phone on the campus of Samsung. Right now, obviously, every single employee has a camera in their pocket. And so I think that people realize with this new technology that there's probably not tens of thousands of would-be criminals just waiting for this perfect technology to be able to spy on each other. And I think it's just a matter of education. What can you get at the Apple store? Wireless baby monitors and drop cams and things like that could easily be set up silently and very small and not noticeable in somebody's house versus a loud, blinky, lit up drone flying out the window. The reason, so I think it's just a matter of education and a matter of saying, let's leverage existing anti-invasion of privacy laws and make sure that those laws are applied to whatever technology is being used to invade somebody's privacy. And there should be consequences.
And I guess what I would follow up on is that we already have an existing technology that does this, that chases bad guys from the air. So I guess, Mr. Williams, you could answer this. Would the FAA decide that they would follow the same exact rules as maybe an air unit does in today's law enforcement? Would they follow the same rules, or would they be able to do different things because, a helicopter can't fly like a UAS can. A helicopter can't do the things that a small UAS can do. So that's, I think, will be a question for Congress is, are we going to lax those rules to make it more available for the troops on the ground, the cops on the ground, to use it in a different manner?
Well, one of the initiatives we took back in 2012 was to set up a special process called for in our reauthorization of 2012 for law enforcement. And we have been working directly with individual law enforcement agencies around the country. There's some that have had some spectacular success with their aircraft, and it is a priority for my office to continue to support law enforcement use of unmanned aircraft and find ways to improve their operations. And I have two individuals who do that as their full-time jobs. So we very much support finding ways for law enforcement to use unmanned aircraft safely.
Thank you.
Yeah, Congressman, I just wanted to point out that AUVSI in an earlier effort, we did work with the International Association of Chiefs of Police to develop guidelines. I'd be happy to submit those for the record.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. The gentleman from Washington, Mr. Newhouse, recognized for his question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for being here today to enlighten us about this very exciting and important subject. Of being in agriculture, I too share the vision for the future and how we can produce our crops more efficiently and effectively. But a couple questions, and I think that Dr. Lauber, if I might start with you, I've heard a couple themes, at least two today, that talks about the potential of the unmanned industry as far as both public and privately, and then also the importance of safety of integrating these unmanned systems into the national airspace. And so speaking about that and realizing the speed and some of these innovations are happening, it certainly seems that safety should be a primary focus of what we're talking about. And so I'm curious about the investment of harmonizing these systems with manned platforms, specifically talking about collision avoidance systems in general, perhaps specifically an ADS-B transponder, those kinds of things. So if you could talk a little bit about that, I would be appreciative.
Yeah, I think that you've already addressed several of the key considerations that we took up in our report. Clearly, in order to achieve success in integrating these systems into the airspace and in realizing the potential benefits of these systems, we have to do it in such a way that safety is not adversely impacted. It will not fly, so to speak, to introduce these things in such a way that it imposes or adds risk to the system. Dr. Hansman has already outlined a couple of the key risks that have to be understood: collision with other aircraft and collision with the ground. And trying to systematically understand those things is very important, and the FAA's effort to undertake a systematic analysis of risk as it applies to these systems is an equally vital part of this. You know, one of the top 4 and most difficult research projects that we identified was what we called continuous operation without human intervention. And in order for UASs to do this, basically a UAS must have the capability of doing what any manned aviation system does in the present environment. So you've got to make up for all of the missing sensors, taking people's eyeballs out of the vehicle. You have to somehow substitute for that. The ability of humans to make decisions in real time based on unexpected or unanticipated situations. You have to be able to build that into the technology in order to maintain the levels of risk that we have now. So these are of fundamental importance as far as our study is concerned.
Yeah. Thank you. And then just another question. I can't let the FAA off the hook totally. In a recent interview on Business Insider, a magazine, the CEO of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, was asked a question about when they might possibly be delivering packages using these systems. And maybe you've read that article, but it highlights perhaps some of the one I could term overregulation in the R&D in the U.S. He answered a longer answer that I have time for, but the technology is not going to be the long pole. The long pole will be regulation. And so, as was already talked about, with what, a dozen or 14 approvals already for commercial UASs, could you explain why there may be hundreds or even thousands in other countries that have been approved, and here we lag behind, so to speak?
Well, I'm not sure I agree that we've lagged behind. Yes, we don't have a specific rule for small unmanned aircraft, but we also have the most complex airspace in the world. We have the largest number of general aviation operators in the world, and it's a different regulatory and legal framework here than in some of the other countries. Part of my job is to interact with my counterparts from around the world and understand what they're doing and benefit from their experience. So we're taking those things into consideration as we move forward. There are multiple paths for commercial operations. We have 2 operators approved up in Alaska who are using certificated aircraft that have gone through the manned certification process, adapted for use by, for an unmanned aircraft. Obviously, all the rules for manned aircraft didn't apply to them, but there are commercial operations available that way, in addition to this new way we found through the Section 333 process that's designed to bridge us to that regulatory environment we're trying to achieve with the small unmanned aircraft rule.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Newhouse. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Weber, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't know where to start. Are the permits issued from the FAA? Let me understand this. I came in late. So there's been 14 permits approved. Is that right? For
Small civil aircraft operators, yes. We have 2 certificated aircraft that are operating commercially in Alaska, and there are a tremendous number of over 700 public aircraft operators, in other words, government operators that we've approved.
Are they based on size, Mr. Williams? Category 1 might be that you could fly up to something that's 200 pounds, 500 pounds, or is there a weight limit?
Well, the FAA in general takes a risk-based approach to all our approvals, and so we've the reason there are different levels of approval is there's different levels of risk. So for these very small ones that we're now approving through an exemption process, we're essentially, because of their size, weight, and operating environments, basically waiving most of the manned aircraft rules so they don't have to comply.
So what is a small weight?
Under 55 pounds was legislated in our 2012 reauthorization, was defined as small in that legislation.
Are there approved operators that get above 55 pounds?
Yes, sir. On the public aircraft operations side, they go up to the Global Hawk aircraft that both NASA and DoD fly is approximately the same size as 727.
Are they able to cross into Mexico and Canada without violating airspace issues?
I believe the DoD flies around the world with their unmanned aircraft, and they're following the ICAO rules for manned aircraft the same way as they do for...
What about private companies if they cross from the United States into Canada?
We currently don't have any approved private companies that are operating across the borders, and there is a committee, or what they call a panel, has been formed at ICAO to develop the international standards and recommended practices for unmanned aircraft crossing between countries. So that regulatory framework internationally is being developed.
So when a company gets approval, it's permitted or licensed, what do you call it?
Well, we call the pilots get it certificated, I guess would be the best term.
Certificated, okay. Does that process of certification get reviewed after 1 year, 2 years?
From a standpoint of if the aircraft is approved through a type certificate, then it's indefinite. There's no restriction on that. So, for the processes that we're doing through the exemptions, those are good for 2 years.
Okay, so if a UAV, if one of these units falls out of the sky and hits a car on the ground, liability insurance, do people market insurance for these things?
Yes, sir. There is insurance available through the multiple different insurance companies.
Okay. The little cameras on it, I know, Mr. Gwynn, you talked about the high definition camera. Are they able to transmit back video back on the ground? Is that standard, pretty much standard?
Yes, absolutely. Even what Baptiste was flying today from Parrot transmits high-def video back to your tablet.
Is it captured, for lack of a better term, in a little black box? Does it record its own?
There's a myriad of ways to do it. So we can actually record on the ground at the same time that we're recording a much higher bitrate stream on the camera in the air. So for later review, if you need to zoom into an image and check a power line or something like that.
But you said it had a computer on it. Does it have the capability of storing that right on board?
Absolutely. Yeah, most of the cameras that are on board have their own memory card slots, and you're storing it right on the memory card.
It has, and I know this is getting way out there, but are people able, I mean, you think about people hacking into different things. Are they going to be able to hack into these and commandeer these?
It's a good question. I think that, probably for Dr. Lobner, a much better question.
I will just add that cyber-physical security is one of the key issues that we identify in our report. It is a concern, and it needs to be addressed from the outset.
How many drone manufacturers are there? 10, 20?
At least hundreds.
Hundreds?
Yes.
How many in the USA?
Much less than anywhere else in the world. So, I mean, 3D Robotics, our company, is the largest in the U.S.
One final question. You see planes fly over with a number on the bottom of it. You can identify the number. Are the drones numbered, identified?
They're not today, but that's one of the considerations, especially for the heavier systems, to have a tail number.
Okay, and let me go one more question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. So Google has a car that they can drive, they say, wherever without. Can you program one of these drones to go somewhere and back and basically never touch it?
Absolutely, yes. Just right from your smartphone if you need to.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses for showing up today and bringing that great testimony. I had the opportunity to read the written testimony. This is one of those days where another committee meeting with votes required conflicted with the early part of the schedule, so some of us didn't get to see the demonstration of your vehicle. And if the chairman would indulge us, I'd be interested, and I think some of the others would be interested in seeing it.
Okay, do we still have the vehicle and the pilot?
I've got it on video if they want it.
Yeah, we can get it back up in the air in just about 1 minute.
All right, that'll work.
All right, let's have another quick, brief demonstration that perhaps can use more airspace this time, too.
He said, get saucy with it.
Yeah.
Baptiste?
And we'll define haircuts within 2 feet of someone's head. So if you can stay above that, that'll be.
He's going to show you leaf blower mode with your papers on your desk.
Uh-oh. We didn't give you much advance notice here, but
It'll take him about 30 seconds or 45 seconds to connect to the Wi-Fi network before he can take off.
Okay.
Did you have any quick questions in the meantime?
Silence is golden in this committee, too.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. Another fun fact is that he'll be piloting this drone from his iPhone, as well as seeing a live HD feed right on his phone that's being digitally stabilized. So pretty cool for $500.
We'll all have one by the next time you come back to testify here.
Well,
my kids got them for Christmas.
Whoops.
And that's your worst case scenario. Oh my gosh.
You know,
drone crash. Drone crash.
Maybe we won't fly over people. We'll fly.
Yeah, well, as he's flying over you, just do this. Just in case.
Yeah.
A fringe case is when you're asked to fly a drone in 60 seconds in front of Congress.
Yeah.
This is the kind of data we need to be collecting out in the real world.
We need to make allowances for this.
Doesn't count against us.
Yeah. Tell you what, just to take the pressure off of you, maybe we ought to. Okay.
All right, here we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. There we go. Can you head towards Mr. Posey and just keep it right out of. There we go. There you go.
Leaf blower mode, here we go. Baptiste, can I push it around a little bit to show its stability? Or do you want to?
Turns off. I don't know.
Yep, in a very French and stylish way. Thank you.
Thanks again for that. Mr. Posey, anything else? Or?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Holgren, is recognized.
Well, thank you all for being here. This is important and interesting, and really do appreciate the work that you're doing, and we do want to be helpful and make sure that we do this well. With development usage, I know of UAS expanding, certainly is crucial that we understand the research our government is doing, especially the research that will affect the rulemaking process FAA is currently undergoing. From a competitive standpoint, it's also crucial that we do this right so that we're not encouraging businesses to move elsewhere or denying access to researchers for the best, most cost-effective tools that they need to do their work. To be frank, sometimes I find the FAA's process to be a little bit confusing, and I agree certainly with the need for public safety. That should always be our top goal, but right now, my fear is in the name of safety, I'm afraid we are stifling innovation and research opportunities by keeping pretty harmless UASs out of the sky. At the same time, on an unrelated topic, but one that's important to me. I've been trying to get answers from the FAA about their air traffic controller hiring practices, which were recently changed, and I believe could jeopardize the safety of airline passengers across the country. We're going to continue to try and get answers there from the FAA. But getting to questions, Mr. Williams, in early December 2014, the Association of American Universities and Association of Public Land-Grant Universities wrote a letter to FAA stating, and I quote, "There is no timely workable mechanism for both public and private universities to secure FAA approval to conduct important research utilizing small unmanned aerial systems or SUAS technology." Wondered, has FAA considered issuing a rule to make it easier for universities to research SUASs, such as allowing universities to research SUASs on their own property below 400 feet?
Well, we believe that our small rule will address the needs of the universities. We also believe that, and I've had discussions with several universities about this, that they can move forward using our Section 333 process to conduct their training, research, et cetera. And I've had discussions with several universities about the possibility of doing that, and I think they're interested.
Okay. So in the meantime, there is some opportunities there, but also you expect that the rule would give them this ability to do some of the research that they're looking to do. Mr. Williams, roughly how much interest is there in the FAA test sites in terms of calls, meetings, and website visits? How many organizations have actually used the test sites?
I don't have that data with me, sir. We can certainly get back to you with that.
Could you? That'd be great. If you can maybe get that back to us or to the committee, that would be terrific. Mr. Wynn and Mr. Gwynn, how would you organize the FAA UAS test sites to best accommodate industry's R&D needs?
Sir, we want to get this word out. I think it's early days for the test sites, so we've got to make the more accessible. We've discussed earlier the need for greater transparency, getting the costs down, et cetera. I think there's also a need to focus the research on the specific areas that we've been all agreeing needs to be advanced. So I think those are the primary elements that we'd be looking at.
Do you have anything to add?
I would take the 6 FAA test sites that exist in remote locations and expand that to test sites that might be on your company's private property that have, strict regulations around what you're allowed to do, geofenced. The drones with a geofence will not cross that barrier. They have that level of intelligence today. So sub 400 feet, don't cross the geofence, remain line of sight, and now that test site can be on your own company's property.
Have you heard if they're open to that, looking into that?
Are you guys open to that?
Mr. Williams?
I believe that we have the experimental process could accommodate that type of operation. We have experimental airworthiness certificates that we issue for development, research, et cetera, that have been taken advantage of by other companies to do exactly that. So that process does remain available to anyone who chooses to use it.
And I hear that a lot, and that's the same. Is that the same airworthiness certificate that there's been 14 total granted so far in the country of all the people that want to fly drones?
No, we've issued quite a few more experimental certificates.
So the Section 333, that's what is required for a private drone operator to be able to operate and do testing?
That's for commercial use. The experimental process is for the developmental use.
Okay, so I guess I'm talking about more for private sector versus government.
Let me ask you this real quick because I'm running out of time. But on that, how do you see other countries' openness to doing this versus the United States? Your members, have you seen similar openness here as in other countries, or do you see greater challenge?
Well, there's a huge disparity, and I think in other countries they just use a simple, proportional risk-based system to say if the drone is very lightweight and being flown low altitude, line of sight, there's a lot less regulation than a heavy drone being flown out of line of sight at higher altitudes. So
to me, it makes common
logical.
sense. Yeah,
it's pretty logical.
So hopefully we can see what other countries have been doing safely, and we can do the same thing here. Thank you, Chairman, for your indulgence. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Holtgren. And the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer, is recognized for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was called away to another meeting, so I missed a lot of this, and thank you for the demonstration. I might ask for one of those for Christmas myself. Couple of things. I don't know if this has been asked, but has anyone done an estimate of the economic impact in the context of what it would be worth to the U.S. economy for if we had the design and engineering done here in the United States, if we do the construction here, manufacturer, I should say, the manufacturer of, well, if you're doing UAS is as big, did you say as large as a 727? Is that what you said? So you would be doing design, engineering, and construction here. Has anyone looked at what the economic impact of that might be?
Yes, sir. The numbers that my organization had put together in 2013 suggest that after we have access to the National Airspace System, the economic impact amounts to about $82 billion and 100,000 jobs, 100,000 plus jobs. Those numbers were put together in 2013. We think they probably, we're going to update those numbers. We think they probably understate the opportunity.
Now that is just the design, engineering, construction. That's my question.
And ancillary.
And that would be the commercial use?
No, that does not include commercial use.
Okay.
Profitability for other business models.
All right. Are we losing any technological advantage by the delays in approval for testing? In other words, if this is if this goes offshore?
For the design and test, in those numbers, I think yes, sir. I think that's an important distinction. The markets that the end user community, such as the insurance industry, the agricultural community, et cetera, they'll still want to utilize the technology. The question is whether or not they'll be using American-built technology.
Mm-hmm. And if I may add to that, during the course of our study, we heard presentations from many in the industry. Many of them told us that they could not conduct the kind of research and development that they needed to do in the U.S. and that they were taking their operations offshore. And if I may briefly add, in November I participated in a meeting sponsored by the National Airspace Academy in France. And one of the key things that came out of that conference was the fact that the DGAC, the French FAA, in 2012 issued a risk-based set of regulations covering the very small UASs, I think 2.5 kilos. They put those in place. As of the time of the conference, which was in November, there were over 1,000 certified operators, more than 1,600 vehicles in French airspace alone. And there were multiple manufacturers and others participating in this. It was really quite interesting to see this industry taking off there.
And those numbers for France, that France is approximately 90% the populace of Texas. Yep. Is that right? So yeah, we could probably get some pretty amazing economic benefit for the whole country.
Going back to the size of these things, you said at 727. Do you foresee a company like Federal Express or one of the big commercial materials carriers utilizing these for high-capacity transports?
There's interest in the part of Federal Express explicitly in several other, particularly cargo operators. This is going to be a long time in the future. These capabilities will first come through in the military, be demonstrated, and the risk issues will be demonstrated. But 50 years from now, 60 years from now, there will be UAVs. We can do it technically today. The issue is to work out all the operational details.
And one of those operational details, I would assume, would be ensuring that the guidance systems cannot be hacked.
Exactly. That's the comment that Dr. Lomber talked about. One of the key research areas are the cybersecurity issues, particularly associated with the uplink, command uplink.
My last question has to do with utilizing these for high altitude subspace, maybe even launch and return capabilities, high altitude subspace for, say, weather evaluations, things like that. Is that something that's on on the drawing board?
One of the biggest potential markets is actually the use of these vehicles for high altitude relay for basically internet on the surface. So, so you can have long persistence vehicles at high altitude that can act effectively as satellites and be doing broadband distribution to the ground.
Well, for instance, and I guess my B part of the last question would be, for instance, an unmanned flight to the International Space Station. Do you foresee having the capability for launch and return for a mission like that?
Well, we do it today, right? We have unmanned vehicles that are flying cargo missions to the space station today.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. And let me thank all of our witnesses today. This has been a particularly interesting and informative panel. We wish, Mr. Williams, however, the FAA had told us when they might have the rules ready, but with that possible exception, appreciate all your contributions. And this has really been helpful, I think, to members of the Science Committee, and we look forward to hearing from you all in the future and to waiting and watching to see how the development goes with the integration and with the use of drones, both in the private sector and in the commercial sector as well. So thank you all again for being here.